Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of College Game Day Live. I'm your host, Thor Nystrom, with my co-host, Mike Farrell of Mike Farrell Sports, the godfather of recruiting. Mike, how you doing this morning?
Doing good because, unlike a few people we know, I took UVA getting the points at the start of the game.
Did you?
Sorry, Thomas. And then I took at the halftime, it went up to like 18 and a half, and I took them again. So I doubled down on UVA, won both. And I took UTEP last night, which was insane. I didn't take the money line, but I took the line and they won outright in a rout. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Man, Hank Bachmeier. I don't even know if we have the time to get into what has happened to Hank Bachmeier.
No,
he is this year. He has already had two of the worst statistical games in all of college football. It's getting weird with Hank Bachmeier, but we digress. We for the next 90 minutes, Mike and I are going to hit as many games as we humanly possibly can, so we can't talk about Hank Bachmeier further. Unfortunately, we are also going to be taking and fielding your questions in the episode. So if you have any questions about anything on the card, feel free to type it into the box. The producer, Thomas, will see them and we'll get to them. We have different points in the show where we'll hit the questions. So please ask them if you have any. But let's get right to it, Mike. Starting with the noon kickoffs, noon Eastern kickoffs. Very first game. And, Mike, you knew I had to put this one at the top just to make sure we gave it the attention it deserves.
Yes.
My Kansas Jayhawks, the game of the past decade plus for the Jayhawks, hosting Duke. Live, we have a line of Kansas -7, total of 63.5, a game of undefeated Power 5 teams. I don't know where College Game Day is, but Mike, what are your thoughts on this game?
They're not at Duke, Kansas. In case you don't know, they're at Tennessee, Florida, which is a slightly bigger game. But I get it. You're a Kansas guy. And, to Kansas fans, a little bit of a discussion with Lance Leopold today, confirming how happy he is at Kansas and how excited he is to build there. And, that's good. Now, again, could be coach speak. They all say they're never leaving. Scott Frost, remember, never leaving, and on and on. But things are rolling in Kansas. I like Kansas to cover this line. Duke is a bit of a mirage team to me, whereas Kansas to me is more legitimate. I hate the 7 line. I hate it. But I'm going to lay it because they've been putting up so many points. Their offense has been exceptional. I think you could play the over here too. But I think they're going to score enough points to beat Duke by at least 10 to 14 points. So lay the 7, take the Jayhawks to go continue to be undefeated.
I love it. And Mike, you're being a little humble there. I mean, you actually talked to Lance, right?
Yeah, I did. It's a humble brag, but there's a lot of coaches that are. I think what I've learned going independent is that there's coaches that are users and whiners that just kind of talk to me a lot because I was with a big company, and then when I went independent, a lot of those guys disappeared, and then there's the reals. The guys that stay and talk to you continually and always have that relationship going. And Lance is one of those guys.
Give us a sense of you talking to Lance. Give us a sense of how confident he is in. Obviously, every coach is going to feign some level of confidence when they're talking to a member of the media about their team. But do you get a sense from him that he's super bullish that this team is legitimate or that he's happy to be here?
It was certainly an off the record discussion. It wasn't really a media person talking to a coach. It was, just sort of a chat. The impression I get from him is he's extremely happy at Kansas. It's game by game, though, as with every coach. You talk about big picture, you talk about other jobs, you talk about staying at Kansas, and then it instantly goes down to we got to beat Duke. We have this football game against an undefeated team, and he's treating this as if he's playing Oklahoma or Texas or any, major power. And he knows that this is an opportunity to go 4-0. So it's really about focus, but he seems to be very, very happy with where he landed. To me, if you build Kansas into a winner, and I'm talking 7-5, you're going to be sought after for every job, so I just don't know what's going to happen, but I know as of today, he's pretty happy. They're hosting Duke. They're laying 7, and I think they're going to cover that because I think this is a good football team.
Yeah, I asked that because it's what I've been trying to think about with this Kansas team specifically. You know, drown out the noise of the hype and drown out the noise of, you know, is Lance going to stay or leave if things keep going well. When you try to handicap this specific Kansas team, I've watched every snap so far. You know, of course, they slapped around the FCS team. The last 2 wins were super duper impressive. They went on the road back-to-back weeks and beat legitimate opponents, and they were not fluky wins. Kansas was the best team on the field in both of those games, won them both. I mean, in impressive fashion, both of them. So you're trying to think like, were those, not that those results were fluky in any way, because but were they one-offs or were, what can we expect going forward? I think this Kansas team is legitimate. What I don't know about is on the Duke side, because Duke hasn't played anybody yet. They're also 3-0, and they have also, you got to give it to Duke. They have also looked impressive under first-year coach Mike Elko. The offenses look more impressive. The defense in particular has looked way more impressive than recent incarnations of the Duke defenses. But we don't know really anything about Duke yet. We do know that they're better than they have been in recent years. But who have they beaten so far? They beat Northwestern, who now is confirmed to be trash. I mean, like, their one win was against a Nebraska team that we know is garbage. And then Northwestern at this point has had some embarrassing losses, and the rest of the resume, yada, yada.
Yeah. Duke, Temple, NC, A&T. I mean, those aren't real football teams. So
yes, yeah. An FCS team and then a quasi FCS team. So, this game is going to be a referendum game for Duke to see how high they are. With Kansas, I feel like I have a decent read on them. The offense is for real with Kansas. And that leads me to my lean in this game. I'm still too nervous to bet on Kansas games because I'm still, it's still like the Wizard of Oz to use a Kansas illusion. I don't know if I'm in Oz or, whatever yet. I don't want to pinch myself and wake up, but I would lean towards the over in this game. My system has the adjusted total set at 67.5. The Vegas line right now is a little bit lower, 63.5. I think that's nodding at the improvement that the Duke defense has made so far. But Kansas wants to turn this game into a track meet. Jalen Daniels has been one of the most impressive quarterbacks in the nation so far. If people out there have not checked him out, make sure to tune in for at least a portion of this game. That kid's a treat to watch. Kansas is super deep in the backfield, and their receiving core is actually pretty legit as well. And Duke has some guys as well. That Waters kid, they have a couple different running backs as well. Calhoun and their receiving core, they can do a couple different things on offense as well. So I do lean the over. At -7, I would lean Kansas as well. But being the alum and being nervous about, them jumping back into relevance, I can't touch it, but those are my leans. Mike, jump into the next noon Eastern kickoff. Baylor traveling to Iowa State. Iowa State is a 2.5-point favorite live with a total on this game of 45.5. Who do you like in this game?
Yeah. I mean, I do like Baylor in this game. Everything kind of points that way for me. It's a difficult game because Iowa State is one of these sneaky undefeated teams, and they beat an Iowa team that can't score points. And the other 2 victories, Southeast Missouri State and Ohio, don't really count. So you don't know what you're getting here from Iowa State. You assume you're getting a very boring offense and a good defense because they lost so much last year. And Baylor, lost to BYU. BYU lost to Oregon. So you're wondering how good Baylor is. I know this is on the road. I know Iowa State's laying points. And I think Baylor wins this game outright. So I do like Baylor. And I actually like the money line here. I think Baylor's, it's plus 120. It's not going to make you rich. But I think if you take the money line, I think Baylor wins this game outright.
Yeah, this is a really, really tough one for me. So far, Baylor has not impressed me as much as I have wanted them to. A part of that is injuries. They've had at least 3 offensive starters that have missed multiple games to this point. One of the good things is I'm hearing that they're getting those guys back. I'm talking about Tay McWilliams, their running back, Monterio Baldwin, their slot receiver, and Ben Sims, their tight end. all those guys were in concussion protocol going back a couple weeks. Looks like they're going to get at least 2 of them back for this game. They might get all 3. So that's the good news there. But Blake Shapen has not played as well so far as they wanted. And you wonder, like, is that because, their skill talent level has been depreciated because of the injuries? Is it because they played the BYU defense, and the BYU defense that day had a good game that they did not against Oregon? You're just sort of trying to wonder some of that stuff. I can't quite get my finger on Baylor quite yet. And then, of course, their defense had lost all those studs. Like, watching Baylor the past several years, it was synonymous with hearing the name Terrell Bernard and Jalen Petrie every 2 seconds from the announcer. Like, you couldn't watch one defensive play without either one or both those guys' names being called. Those guys are gone in the NFL now. They still have pieces on that Dave Aranda defense, but it's not as talented as it was last year. So, again, I'm still trying to get a feel for them. And Iowa State, to your point, I would almost say even more so, right? Like, I mean, they haven't really played anyone yet. They had that rock fight with Iowa, their one quality opponent in Kinnick, where the entire game flipped on an Iowa fullback fumbling at the 1-inch line, and then Iowa State turning around and doing their only drive of the game. They had a 99-yard drive off of that, and that's how they won the game. Outside of that, that was the only portion of the game that you needed to watch. The rest of it was brutal. And Iowa State hasn't played anyone outside of that. We've talked about them. They've lost, Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Charlie Collard. They lost a bunch of guys on the defense. So it's a whole new look team, and we haven't seen them, again, outside of the Iowa game, and Iowa just wants to make the games ugly. They don't want to make you play the way that you want to play. Credit to Iowa State and their young kids for overcoming them. But this is going to be a little bit of a different challenge. I've gone back and forth on this game all week long. I was leaning towards Iowa State early in the week for sure, when I did not know the status of the 3 Baylor skill guys. Now that I know that 2 of them are playing and maybe 3, now I'm sort of starting to lean towards your side, Mike, more towards the Baylor side. I don't think I would touch the total, just because I got questions about both the offenses so far, but both of them have talent. Like, I've seen flashes from that Deckers kid. I've seen flashes from Jarrell Brock, and I've seen flashes from Shapen. Not so many this year, but going back to last year, I do believe in that kid. And I think with a full arsenal of talent, I think he'll play up. So I can't do the total just yet. I can't bet on it, but I think I'm going to switch my pick and lean towards Baylor as opposed to Iowa State. But really, this one, it's too close to call. I will say my system is more confident than I am. It has Baylor as a 2.8 point favorite for whatever it's worth. But for me, I'm right on the line of this game. For all of our audience that's watching right now, we're going to answer audience questions after 2 more games, after the Clemson Wake Forest game. So if you have any questions, type them in, and we'll get to questions here just in a little bit. But next, we're going to TCU SMU, another game with a noon Eastern kick. We got an interesting one here, Mike, with TCU's new coach going up against his old team. There's some motivation to play here. Sonny Dykes wants this game. This line's been doing some interesting things this week. It looks like now it's at TCU -2. It was lower earlier in the week. I think it even opened at SMU -1, and then it had gotten up to TCU -2.5. Looks like it's toggled back down to 2. We also have a total in this game of 70.5. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, 70.5 is a lot. I like TCU in this game. I know there's actually motivation. There's motivation on the side of SMU as much as anything, because it did come out, the Sonny Dykes said that they didn't have the commitment to football, and, that's part of the reason he left, blah, blah, blah. And when that stuff comes out, the week before a game, it's going to fire teams up. But this is going to come down to, who has more talent, who has more playmakers. And I like Tanner Mordecai, but I really like, TCU defensively. I mean, they've only played 2 games. They handle Colorado, who sucks, and I don't even know where Tarleton's from. So I can't really talk about that. But I know, Condre Miller has a chip on his shoulder because everybody ignored him. Zach Evans transferred, and they said, "Oh my God, who we got?" Well, he's a 1,000-yard rusher that nobody really talked about. Max Duggan is effective. He's been very, very precise. His completion rate in 2 games is 80%, nearly 80%, 13 yards per pass, which is very, very good. 5 TDs, no picks, again, against nobody. But I think it's an efficient offense. I think, defensively they're solid. And I really don't believe in SMU despite Mordecai's talent. I have TCU winning this football game. It's -2.5 now. So it has flipped completely. But I still like TCU. It could be a field goal game, but if you're laying 2.5, you're still going to win.
Yeah, these are, in terms of like their treetop profiles, these teams are fairly similar in that you have 2 top 25 offenses, and the defenses are both, like, in terms of like efficiency, I'm looking at SP plus, but they're both around average for the FBS, like in the mid 60s, low 60s, something like that. But I do like TCU for a couple of the different reasons that you were sort of alluding to. Number one, I mean, the head coach, he knows all the personnel on the other side. And you mentioned that he gave some bulletin board material to the other side, but I think I would prefer to have the knowledge of the personnel on the other side. I also like the personnel that he's taking into the game more than SMU's personnel. And I like the point that you made about Max Duggan. Max Duggan took a lot of crap over the offseason, including from me, because I thought that Chandler Morris was going to win that job and should win that job, and he did win that job. And, he came out, he seemed to be a better fit for Sonny Dykes' air raid than Duggan. He wins the job, but when he was playing that crappy Colorado team that you were mentioning, the worst Power 5 team in the nation, he did not play well to start it out. TCU's offense was very sluggish to begin that game. Right when Chandler Morris got injured, Duggan came back in, the former starter, the guy who wasn't starting because his accuracy is slip shot. But Duggan had everything else before. He's a tough kid. He's a great runner, and he has arm strength too. It's just the accuracy has never really been there. So that's why he didn't get the opportunity to start the season. He immediately sparked that offense against Colorado. They immediately scored like 2 touchdowns, and then it was off to the races. They blew him out in the second half. And then he was awesome against Tarleton, wherever Tarleton happens to be. And I hope we don't have a Tarleton grad watching right now, because they're going to be very upset with us. What are the chances
of that? I mean, 0% chance.
Maybe the Appy people were watching when Texas A&M was making fun of them. So I'm hoping that Tarleton doesn't have a big upset today, and then people replay this clip on Twitter and make fun of us. But anyhow, I just, Duggan he seems to be, at least for right this second, a better fit not because he's the better passer than Morris, but because he's more experienced than Morris, and because you can do more things with him than Morris. He's given you the running element, and I think that's what is going to come into play here. I think SMU is going to have a lot of problems defending the combination of him. And then you mentioned Miller. I love the point that you made about that. I was talking about this over the summer about there was a lot made about Zach Evans leaving TCU and going to Ole Miss, and that was a big get for Lane, of course. But last year, Keandre Miller, he was a better on a per touch basis than Zach Evans. I mean, it wasn't by a ton, but it was by a little bit, and he's a more fleshed out back as well. You can do more things with him because Zach Evans isn't really playable on passing downs. So he's a better fit for this offense as well. Yeah. TCU brought back so much experience. I'm with you, Mike. I like TCU in this game.
Too much of SMU reliance on Rashee Rice. If he doesn't have a big game, the drop off between him and the next receivers is low. And Mordecai has been locking in on him. His completion rate's only 59.8%. He's throwing the 3 picks, 2 of them against Maryland. He's locking in. Rice had 15 targets, I believe, in that Maryland game. Caught 11 passes, had a great game, but you got to spread the ball around, and Mordecai's kind of got this locked vision on him. So if they take away Rice, they're going to have trouble passing the ball. They can't run the ball as effectively as TCU. So, this one, all signs point to TCU winning. It just depends on how ticked off SMU is. And Tarleton State is in Stephenville, Texas. Oh. We've just learned something.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Is that where Art Briles is from, or is that the wrong city?
I have no idea. I've heard Art Briles from my entire
yeah. I thought that might have been the high school he coached at. But anyway, to Mike's point about Rashee Rice, get ready for this if you're not sitting down to the target point. Rashee Rice this season has 44 targets, The next highest guy on the team has 15. The next highest after that has 8. That's how much they're forcing the ball to Rashee Rice, to Mike's point.
Forcing. And the over under for yards is Rashee Rice is over 134.5. That's high. I would take the under because I think if you're game planning against SMU, you take him away. You bracket coverage, you lean your safety over that way. Make them throw to other people. Keep that guy under 100 yards. You're going to win the football game. So the under at 134.5 for Rashee Rice is kind of intriguing to me, and I would pop that.
I like that. Yeah, and you have to – I mean, not only does the TCU staff have access to the game tape so far, but Sonny Dykes knows the game of Rashee Rice and the rest of them very, very well, like we mentioned. One more game at noon before we move to the next time slot, and we'll be answering questions from the audience after this game. So if you have any quick that you want to put in the chat, please do, and we'll get to them here in a second. Clemson at Wake Forest. The line of this game was doing all sorts of weird things, Mike, and frankly, it was getting in my head this week because my line on this game has been higher than what it was. But let's just get into it. Right now, it seems that the line has gone up to now it's Clemson -7.5, but it had dropped all the way to 7, and it was there for several days. But when I woke up this morning, it's now gone back up to ticked up to Clemson -7.5. We have a total on this game right now of 55.5. Who do you like in this one?
I mean, you're right. This one is a difficult call. There's rumors out there that Quinn Ewers is physically ready to play. Will we see him? I tried to
Mike, Clemson Wake Forest.
Oh, Clemson Wake Forest. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was moving to Texas Tech. I'm sorry.
All good.
Clemson Wake Forest.
Trying to jump ahead to the yeah.
I was totally jumping to Quinn because I just checked my text messages and I got a little tidbit about Quinn Ewers. Clemson Wake Forest. 7.5. I love because I like Clemson. To win this football game. And I think they're going to win by 10. If it gets to 7 or 6.5, I love it even more. I have Clemson winning. I think this is going to be one of those ones where, it's going to be a close game throughout. I think Clemson's going to sort of differentiate themselves in the fourth quarter. The defense is very, very good. A lot of people think this is going to be a game where Sam Hartman's throwing the ball all over the place to try to catch up, and they're going to be down by 14 points throughout the game. I don't see it that way. I see it as a close game, but I think Clemson is going to outscore them, outduel them, outlast them in the fourth quarter, win this game by 10 points. Now, 7.5, I think it was even higher than that at one point in time. I would like to see it 6.5. That'd be great. I don't think it's going to trend that way. I think it's probably going to be 8 by the time, the game comes around. But I would still take Clemson by 10. It's going to be close. If you bet this game, if you take, Clemson, you're going to be biting your nails into the fourth quarter. So if you like that adrenaline rush, then take Clemson, and I think you're going to win in the end. Yeah,
I don't really understand what the line has been doing this week. When my line opened on this game, like in a vacuum, it was exactly what you were saying. It was like Clemson minus like 10.5. And that's what I objectively would have put it at. But then all the sharp money, or a lot of the sharp money, has come in on Wake Forest this week, which is the thing that caused it to drop down. And that caused my line to pull down because I got things built into my lines where the market data will pull it as well if it gets like steam moves and discrepancies of like tickets bought against the cash. So it was weird to me. Like I said, it was getting in my head, talking me out of Clemson because I don't know what some of these sharp folks are seeing that I'm not. I've seen this movie before of Clemson playing Wake Forest. Mike, there's only one way to for sure take away Dave Clawson's slow mesh. It's to destroy Wake Forest up front. It's to get to the mesh point before they pull the ball. If you do that, you blow up the entire offense. You don't get into trouble with the Wake Forest slow mesh until they're able to, Hartman's able to survey the field or hand it off if he sees the opening. But then, after that's when they put you into conflict. If they can get past that first, 2 seconds, whatever, that elongated period, very few teams can blow it up immediately. We've seen Clemson do that to Wake Forest every time they played in the past several years. And Clemson's front seven is the nastiest in the nation this year. Yeah, I mean, they brought back everybody.
Well, and how are you going to, edge KJ Henry, Miles Murphy, the two interior guys, Brian Brise and Tyler Davis, all of these guys are in the first and second round discussion. But then you get to the linebackers, and Trotter's a heat-seeking missile in the middle. But Trenton Simpson and Barrett Carter are both extremely athletic guys who aren't going to over-pursue. So I think, this isn't a great matchup for what Wake wants to do. And that's kind of why I'm leaning towards Clemson to cover. The money is there because it's at home, and Wake Forest is a very good football team, and Clawson's an extremely good coach. And a lot of people think, Sam Hartman and that ability to throw the football is going to keep them in this game and allow them to cover under a touchdown. I just see that this is a close game for 3 quarters, turns into a bad one, in 10 to 14 point win. And I've got a prop too. Sam Hartman's number is 295.5 passing yards versus Clemson. I like the under.
I do too.
The only way he reaches that is if this game gets out of hand and if Wake Forest has to, get rid of their game plan and throw the ball on every play. But I think this is, close to 3 quarters, balanced offense from Wake Forest. Clemson's offense isn't that great either. I mean, there's a lot of question marks about DJ and how explosive they can be. I look for this to be sort of a little bit of a fist fight for 3 quarters and then Clemson taking over at that point in time and Hartman coming in that 295.5 below it.
Yeah, beyond even Clemson matching up really, really well, and beyond the fact that we've seen this same cast of characters dominate the other cast of characters in recent years, Pete Thamel reported something really interesting this morning that should scare people that are holding Wake Forest tickets, I think. Wake Forest top cornerback Kalen Carson is out today with a leg injury, and there's 3 defensive backs who have started for Wake Forest who are also out. 2 different nickel cornerbacks, Kobe Davis and Brendan Harris, are also out. So they're down to their 3rd nickel, and they're missing their top corner. Now, you're playing DJU, who neither of us are confident in, and Clemson's receiving core is certainly not what it was under, when they had Trevor Lawrence for sure. But that is troubling. Wake Forest defense isn't good already, and now you're losing your top cover guys. So, and again, they don't match up well on the other side. So the market is telling me one thing, and my heart and my head are screaming another. So it's one of those where, your years of doing this, you at least acknowledge like, okay, I'll back off a little bit, but I'm going to be on Clemson in this one. What I know about the market can't change that. Guys, college football has returned in all of its glory. Betting pros and DraftKings Sportsbook are teaming up to bring you a wild offer to start the new season. New customers can get $200 in free bets instantly when placing a qualifying bet of $5 or more on any college football game. To get in on the action, just create your new DraftKings Sportsbook account using the promo code CFBPROS. Make a minimum deposit of $5 or more, and then place a bet of $5 or more on any college football game to claim your $200 in free bets. Again, to claim this offer, enter promo code CFBPROS at sign up to get started. Mike, we got a couple audience questions, so let's get into them. The first one is, I don't know who this question came from, but the question was thoughts on, there's 3 different games. The first one is East Carolina minus 13. Let me pull it up on my sheet. So is that line down to 13? In my sheet, I had it at 17. They're hosting Navy. Let me pull up the live one. Okay. Well, it's 16 and a half live. So I don't know if whoever asked that has a little bit lower one maybe, but as far as that handicap, I'll give my thoughts first. And then Mike, if you have any, I don't like Navy at all. I'm not going to be backing Navy at all this year. I think, we've seen a depreciation of that program the past couple years, and they were further hurt by that rule that outlawed the cut blocking outside of the tackle box, which was pointed directly at the service academies because they're the ones that do it. It's hurt them even more. Like you saw Navy lost to Delaware, and they haven't looked competitive in some of these other games, etc. And on the other, so they're a sell team for me. On the other side, East Carolina is absolutely a buy team for me. They've been ascending. It looks like the market has put a little money towards East Carolina because the line opened at 18.5. It's now down to 16.5. Frankly, I don't really understand that. I would not be investing in Navy. I don't have a bet on this game because I think the line is fairly close to objective reality, but my line on this game is East Carolina minus 18.1, and that's certainly where I would lean is towards East Carolina.
I'm going to go the opposite. I don't believe in Navy either. I don't believe in Navy, but you're getting 17.5 point, which is the line now. East Carolina is breaking out their white helmets, which are gorgeous, for this game. First time in 5 years. They're freaking 1-8 all time in white helmets.
Ooh.
Like the helmets are so gorgeous, they have to wear them. Never wear them again. They always play poorly. And I know this is superstition and it's kind of dumb, but
I love that stat, Mike.
Well, it's something I can't get away from. You know, if you play in a particular uniform and there's a tradition and a curse against that uniform, and you break it out, and maybe it's overconfidence. You know, Navy sucks. Let's play. They should win this game. You know, I don't think they're going to go 1-9, but I don't think they're going to blow them out either. And I'm blaming the white helmets. So check out the white helmets. They're gorgeous. But also take Navy to cover the 17.5 simply because of those white helmets.
Well, I'm not placing a bet on that game after hearing the white helmet theory.
I really, when it comes to new uniform combinations, and you come out like Ohio State's coming out with a different uniform stay against Wisconsin. Don't. Why? Like use that against Toledo. You know, when you know you're going to rout them. It just makes no sense to me to do this. Now, ECU is different, and we're not talking about a good team against Navy here, but come on. Don't just no white helmets for the rest of the season. How about that?
ECU's getting better. No slander on the Pirates. I like
they are. But 17.5 is a lot, and Navy does slow the game down. So I think they could stay within 17.5.
The other ones that this gentleman was interested in was thoughts on Washington minus 13 and Tennessee minus 9. I thought that line was at 10.
Well, we're going to double check Tennessee games in a few. So, but
so Tennessee's 10.5, and the Stanford Washington one is 13.5. Do you have any thoughts on those ones?
Yeah, we didn't have them. On our list. So let's focus on Stanford Washington, and we'll get to Tennessee Florida. Of course, that's a marquee game of the weekend. We'll get to that in a bit. Stanford, plus 13.5. Washington's coming off. A big victory against Michigan State. They're undefeated. They're in the top 25 for the first time in a while. And they're going to struggle in this football game. They're going to win it, but they're not going to cover the 13.5. Stanford can play physical football. Tanner McKee can stay within himself. They can play this game on the road and stay within 2 touchdowns. I think Washington wins this. I think it's maybe a 7 to 10 point win. But if you're giving me Stanford at 13.5, I'm going to take Stanford to cover just because of the letdown factor of what occurred, rushing the field last week against Michigan State. There's going to be a letdown for Washington.
Yeah, on the side of that one, you got to keep in mind there's a couple injuries. Stanford's starting running back has already been ruled out for this game. Washington has several where they're up in the air. Let me pull them up right now. Kirkland, their stud offensive lineman, he's questionable. They have a safety who's questionable. Their other safety is already out for the year. They have a defensive lineman who's questionable. So there's some health things on both sides. I do, Mike, your point's well taken. My line's a little bit higher. It's 15.2, but I think like the health things on the Washington side plus the potential letdown factor, I think you can justify the 1.5 down. For me, it's a fair line, so I'm not touching that. I think what I would be more interested in is the under of this game. To me, it just seems a little bit high at 61.5. My adjusted total on it's actually 44.5. It's quite a bit lower. Stanford's going to play really slow, of course. That's what they want to do, particularly so because their quarterback is out. I'm sorry, their running back is out. McKee is playing, to be clear, but with Emmett's kid being out.
Yeah, E.J. Smith is very, very good. They're also missing Miles Hinton, who's their best offensive lineman. So to your point, the under here is a very good play because I think it's going to be a little sloppy. Michael Penix has looked like Tom Brady, so far this season. He's throwing the ball all over the place, and he's not running as much, and this is Michael Penix circa 2019, 2020, but more as a passer. But I think that's going to sort of, you can game plan against that, and you can try to make them beat you with the run. And then Stanford's going to struggle scoring points because their best offensive lineman, their best running back is out. So I think they can keep it close and lose by 7 to 10, but the under is really intriguing here.
So that question was from Aiden Tobin. Our next question, Mike, is from McCoy Shedden. I hope I'm saying that right. And McCoy's question is, what are your thoughts about Marshall -3 on the road at Troy today?
I'm big on Marshall these days. I had the ability, and this is the fun part of my job, is that you cover these kids throughout recruiting, and they take their process. Sometimes it's very linear. Trevor Lawrence goes to Clemson and last 3 years becomes a #1 pick, and all that's great. And then sometimes it's a very odd process, and it changes human beings and who they are and their motivation. And so I'm leaning in here to, Kalen LeBourne, a former 5-star kid from Virginia, went to Florida State, had trouble there, was homeless for a while. He's back, and he is really, really extra determined. And I got to speak to him briefly this week. I really do like, Marshall to win this football game. They're favored by 3. I hate that line, but I would take Marshall to win by a touchdown.
Speaking of the running backs, do we know if Ali is coming back this week or if he's?
We don't.
Okay.
We're keeping it very quiet, and rightfully so. I mean, mental health issues, which is what we assume this is. You're not going to see that on the injury report. You're not going to see that. It's same with Eric Gilbert.
Yeah.
Now. We knew he wasn't going to play against Bowling Green, but I don't think it's been really determined whether he's going to play today or not. But I don't think he's a great running back. Don't get me wrong, and he creates a two-headed monster for them. But I don't think the way they're playing, he's necessary for them to cover this line.
LeBourne is good. I'm happy after seeing that kid that he got his opportunity to shine because that kid can play. He can play. I think I don't have a bet on this game. I think I would lean the other way to the dog. I've liked what I've seen of Troy so far this year. They in the opener they kept it closer than expected with Ole Miss. They covered in that game. Then they slapped around an FCS team, and then last week they should have beaten Appalachian State. Obviously, there was the Hail Mary at the end of that game, whatever. So, I mean, part of this for them is it's going to be how quickly can you bounce back from that disappointment. I think if they're able to do that mentally, I like their chances of winning this game, pulling the small upset at home. They're probably like plus 130 or something on the money line. So I
don't trust Watson. Every time he looks great, he throws a pick, and that scares me. And he's also been sacked 9 times this year. The offensive line struggles. That's my worry for Troy, is that Marshall's just going to be able to pressure him into mistakes.
Yeah, certainly could happen. Troy's offense is definitely down. They have problems running the ball as well. I do like their defense a little bit, though, as far as that level goes.
You love Carlton. You love him.
Yes, love that kid. That kid's fun.
Right? You love 5'9" linebackers.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know that kid, well, we'll see about his NFL future, but my gosh, is that guy fun to watch in college? He's absolutely ridiculous. He's like what we would all want to be if we played in college. He's just like, he's just like the, dog off the leash, I suppose you would say. You cannot keep that kid away from the ball. No,
he's fun to watch for sure, but I don't think he's going to be able to, handle this. Marshall offense is like, it's kind of impressive. Notre Dame is bad, but they're not as bad as we think. To go into Notre Dame and win that football game and to stay ahead in that football game and to be able to run the ball against Notre Dame that much, I just think this is a team that got a lot of confidence from that. And it's almost a cocky football team. Columby is a little bit cocky. LeBourne is humbled, from being a 5-star recruit to having to transfer. And that combination of like humbled focus with Columby having to transfer and being like rejuvenated and sort of cocky. I just like that combination for this team.
Well, Columby, he's been around. His frequent flyer miles are certainly way up there. So yeah, okay. I'm going to be leaning the other way on this one. Mike is with you on Marshall. Our last question, and we'll get back to the games, is Isaiah Stewart asks about the Penn State game. He wants to know what we think about Penn State. So Penn State right now live. Let me. It was either 28 or 28 and a half. Let me check what it's up to. So it's 28 and a half. Penn State hosting Central Michigan. I'll go first on this one, Mike. I like Central Michigan in this game. There's a couple different things going on. First of all, I sort of expect. I don't want to say that Penn State's going to overlook Central Michigan, but they're certainly going to have a vanilla game plan heading into it. And then matchup wise, there's one specific thing that lines up really, really, really well for Central Michigan, particularly when you think about getting more than 4 touchdowns. And it's this: Penn State is in the bottom 5 in the nation in tackling rate. They have missed tackles by the bunches in the first 3 games. And on the other side, Central Michigan's whole offense is just give the ball to Lou Nichols every single play. Lou Nichols, the downside of him is he's not an explosive back. The upside of him is he's a very sturdy back who breaks tackles. That's what he is. He's a reliable guy who churns out the yards. He's going to break a ton of tackles in this game, and he's going to keep the clock moving. He's going to be good for 4+ yards every single time. Again, he lacks the high end speed, so he ain't going to break off a ton of the long ones. But I feel like Lou Nichols matches up really well with this Penn State defense. I think Central Michigan could do enough on offense to keep this one within the 28 and a half. That's just too many points.
It's a lot of points. And again, you would think letdown game, sort of, coming off a big win on the road against an SEC team. But I'm not buying it. I'm buying into this team, this Penn State team, really believing in themselves. Sean Clifford is not great, but he's got a lot of confidence from that Purdue game. Nick Singleton has emerged as just a dangerous guy who could score from anywhere on the field. They've got a good 1-2 punch at wide receiver. And defensively, I think they can handle Lou Nichols. And the only reason I say this is Lou Nichols, as you mentioned, is sort of a workhorse. He's a guy who can carry the ball a lot. He's not going to run away from you, but he's going to be consistent. But, man, he's only averaging 3.6 yards per carry this year, which is horrible. And it's against teams that aren't as good as Penn State when it comes to defense. Now, I know they miss a lot of tackles, but I think Penn State can really force this team to throw. And if they have to throw, Daniel Richardson's been effective, 7 touchdowns, 2 picks, but his completion rate is horrible. And they really struggle with their playmakers through the air. So I think they could shut down Lou Nichols. I think they could make them pass. And then I think this game gets out of hand. So in a rare going against one of my commandments on a letdown game with a high number, I believe Penn State's going to win this game by 30+, and I'm going to lay that 28.5.
I just pulled up the props for this game. I was really hoping to see a Lou Nichols number so I could fade you, Mike, while I made my bet on Lou Nichols. Right. But for some reason he's not up right now. They only have Nick Singleton.
Well, and
we made money on last week.
They changed your Nick Singleton. Like, you found Nick Singleton, you found Vegas's mistake last week. Yeah. And now he's at 83.5, which is a much tougher line. He's going to go over 83.5 yards. I think it's a safe bet still. But last week was free money in the 40-yard. You found it, man. It was really amazing. And Vegas didn't want you to find that, or somebody didn't do their homework, because a premier number 1 running back, I know he's a freshman, being at like 43 yards or something, it's like just easy money. We should have bet our mortgages on it. We didn't. We should have. But I did win money on it thanks to you.
I hope during the stream last week at the same time that a whole bunch of bets went in on Singleton on that bad number. And then Vegas was like, yeah, we got to stop giving away free numbers on Singleton lines. Yeah, in my mind's eye, that's the way that it ended up playing out. So we're on different sides on that one. Now we're going to move to the 3:30 Eastern games. Mike, getting into Texas, traveling down to Lubbock, Texas Tech. Texas favored by 7 points. We have an over-under in this game of 61. What are your thoughts on this one?
I got excited because I jumped ahead, like a half hour ago on this?
Yeah.
From my knowledge, and this doesn't really – I don't think this impacts this game because I don't think he's going to start. But Quinn Ewers, from what I know, has been cleared to play, which is amazing because we thought he'd be out 4 to 6 weeks. And originally when we saw the injury, it could have been the season-ending type of thing. Now, Hudson Card's going to be the starter. I think they're going to, handle this game, but it's going to be sloppy. It's a 7-point spread. I think it's going to go back and forth. We might see Ewers in this football game. I still like Texas Tech to cover that line because it's 7. If it was like 6 or 5, maybe I go Texas, but I'm taking Texas Tech to keep this within a touchdown. I don't think they win. But I think it's a close game. And Texas as a team could lose to anybody. The win over UTSA last week was a really good one because every time Texas jumps into the top 25 or is thought to be any sort of back, even after a loss, they always suck. And they didn't suck last week. So I think Texas wins, but I don't like that 7. I'm going to take Texas Tech.
They did start sluggishly in that game, though. But to your point, they did turn it on at the end, pull away from UTSA for sure.
Bijan turned it on. I mean, he saved them. He just took over the game.
Which he'll do. That's a Bijan thing for sure. That's interesting what you're saying about their plan where Quinn Ewers has been cleared, but they're going to start Card anyway. Why do you think they're doing that?
Oh, I think he's been cleared to play and have contact, but I don't think he's ready to play. Cleared.
Got it. Yeah.
Things, but he's not on that. To me, from what I hear, he's not on that IR where it's just going to be in street clothes. I think he might be in uniform. I think, it will be a situation where either they try to ease him into the game if he is available or as an emergency entry. But the point of this is, he looked so good, obviously, against Alabama. He was supposed to be out up to 6 weeks, and he's recovering quicker. And that changes the entire trajectory of this Texas football season to me, because Hudson Card is good, but he makes mistakes and he's easier to game plan against. And that rare arm talent, and again, this wasn't his throwing arm, thank goodness, of Quinn Ewers, I think changes the perspective. So I think they were trying to keep it quiet that he'd be available. And I think he is, but I don't think he's going to play a factor in this game. The only reason I mention it is if Texas Tech gets up a couple of touchdowns and Hudson Card looks horrible, there could be an opportunity for Quinn Ewers to make an appearance here, and in heroic fashion, he could lead them to a comeback victory.
We could have a Willis Reed here.
Yeah, in a less, obviously this isn't a game 7, and then this is Texas Tech, but I think I was so excited seeing Quinn Ewers play against Alabama, and so excited to see how well he played and how the game wasn't too big for him. I want to see him back. And it's positive news. Now, he could be in street clothes. This is sourcing information. This isn't Sark calling me and saying he's going to be ready. This is, this is just, he could show up in street clothes, but he also could show up in uniform. And I don't think we ever thought that would happen after we got the diagnosis after the Alabama game. Remember, that was 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So 4 to 6 weeks turning into 2 weeks is great news for Texas. And he's just an extra X factor here. I'm still taking Texas Tech, but that changed my thinking a little bit, and it made me kind of wonder if I should take Tech since they have that secret weapon potentially available. But I'm going to go Tech here. I'm going to assume Ewers isn't going to play at all. I think he's cleared, but I don't think he's ready to be thrown in there. And I think the Oklahoma game would be more, sort of a game that would bring him back. But I'm going Tech because I like the 7 line for them. I think they could keep this within a touchdown.
Yeah, and to your point, the books are not offering passing props on Texas, the quarterback props. They are for Tech. You can bet on Donovan Smith, but the books are not offering either Card or Ewers. So there is
that's suspicious, right?
Yeah. I mean, people don't know who's going to be playing yet. So I mean, Texas. It's definitely adds intrigue leading up to kickoff. Mike, I'm with you on. I haven't bet this game, and I'm probably not going to bet this game, but I have the same lean that you do. I lean towards Texas Tech. I didn't love what I saw from Texas Tech last week against NC State, particularly early in that game. It was just weird. They couldn't get the offense running, but NC State has a really, really good defense, is of course the caveat there. Texas Tech had played really well the week before that against Houston. I like Donovan Smith. You know, Tyler Shuck, he seems at least to be an analog for Tyler Shuck qualitatively. So it doesn't seem like they've fallen off any because of that injury. Texas has to go into Lubbock, where Texas Tech is way better than they are on the road. I think that's another really big factor here. My line on this game, it's like Texas Tech Texas Tech plus 4.5 as opposed to plus 7. So I am showing a little bit of line value on Texas Tech, them being the home team. I'm going to ride with them. Mike, our next game, very interesting one. Notre Dame traveling to Chapel Hill to play UNC. This line, which opened with Notre Dame being the favorite, has now toggled the other way and is all the way up to North Carolina minus 2.5. And we have a total on this game of 55.5. What do you like in this one?
You've had a really crappy offense against a really crappy defense.
Yes, we do.
When you get that, you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Notre Dame could come out and put up a big number against North Carolina because they're so inept. Or, North Carolina could take advantage of this awful offense with Drew Pine at quarterback and no real playmakers and not utilizing the speedy playmakers that they have, which is puzzling to me.
Yeah.
Man, it's clearly a tough one. I like UNC simply because I believe in Drake May, and I believe in Drake May more. This kind of boiled down to me to one of my commandments is when you don't know what to do, take the better quarterback. If there's a substantial difference between quarterbacks, if it's a Patrick Mahomes versus Derek Carr, or a Josh Allen versus Tua, that type of thing. This is one of those. Drake May is 10 times better than Drew Pine. I'm taking North Carolina to lay the 2.5 and cover this game.
I like it. That my lean is the exact same way. It's hard to have confidence in Notre Dame against competent opponents after what we've seen from them so far. The defense is okay, but not even the defense is what we thought it would be, and the offense stinks. And now you got to go up against UNC. UNC scores on anybody. UNC is going to score on Clemson defense. They're going to score on any defense that they play. Now, their defense is going to give up points to literally anybody that they play. We saw that when they played the FCS team. But Notre Dame, we'll see if they can take advantage of that. You'd have to figure that Notre Dame is going to score a little bit just because they're playing UNC's defense. But overall, the game script is going to go in UNC's favor, right? Like the way that they want to play, that's the way that this game is going to be played. This is not going to be a low score. I would be shocked if this is a low scoring game. So I lean UNC for sure. I also lean the over in this game. My system also likes the over. 55.5 is what it is live. My system had a total of 62. So showing almost a touchdown of value on that over. So both Mike and I like UNC.
Got a prop for you.
Oh, please. Yeah.
Both like UNC, laying the 2.5. We both are on the over, but you could parlay that if you want to.
Yeah.
Michael Mayer, 49.5 yards is his over under. Last week, he caught 2 passes for 10 yards against Cal. And everything I've heard out of my sources is that was one of the reasons why they were so upset with Drew Pine. Mayer was not targeted enough, and when he was targeted, he was just not hit the proper way. He was overthrown. Michael Mayer is going to get 12 targets in this game, and he's going to go over that 49.5 for sure. You remember the previous game, he had 10 catches, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. He is their one difference maker on offense, and there was a real anger through the coaching staff that Mayer was not involved in that football game as much against Cal. And Cal didn't take him away. They just didn't utilize him properly. So look for feeding Michael Mayer. UNC has no solution for him. UNC has some good athletes on defense. They're just young and inexperienced, but they also have linebackers that are somewhat sawed off, and they can't hang with this dude. He's a behemoth. So over 49.5 Michael Mayer. Mash that number, even if it's minus 140, mash it.
I like this one, Mike. Yeah, this might be our best prop that we found yet today. This is a really good one. UNC can't defend anyone, and Mayer is one of the biggest matchup problems in the nation. You just mentioned the motivation and getting them the ball, and I'll give you guys some context. Last year, Mayer went over what the number would have been in 10 of his 12 games, and in some of them significantly so. Like he went over. Just for instance, he went over 80 yards in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, went over in 6 of 12 games, went over 80 yards. So in half of them this year, seems like, to Mike's point, seems like it's artificially low because of what happened last week. And seems like Drew Pine has gotten an earful this week about that. And then in the first game, he at least got targets, but Ohio State was devoting all their defense to stopping him. So he finished with, and then there was the quarterback injury. Mayer finished with 5 catches for 32 yards. The second game was more in line with his usual production, a usual day at the office. 8 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown against Marshall. I like that one, Mike. That I will definitely be on that one with you. Moving to our next one. This is another one with a really interesting line and really interesting line movement during the week. Minnesota is a 3-point favorite in East Lansing against Michigan State. We got a total on this game of 50.5. Who do you like in this one, Mike?
I like Michigan State to bounce back. That line we talked about last week where Washington was favored at home against the number 11 team in the country was super duper fishy. We warned you against it, and Washington ended up covering. So when Vegas knows something, they know something. This game's line seems in line with what I would expect. Although, I don't understand why Michigan State's getting 2.5 at home. It seems odd. I would have them favored. So when I see that one, it's not obscenely off, and it's a good number to play. So take Michigan State to cover in this game with a bounce back victory, maybe by a field goal, but even if it is, you cover.
Love it. Yeah. With me, I'm having a hard time getting my finger on it and wondering what the sharps who moved this line early in the week, what they're seeing, maybe that I'm not, because the line opened at Michigan State minus 1.5. And, by Wednesday, it was Minnesota -3. I've watched a lot of this Minnesota team this year. I live in Minneapolis. They run the ball well. And they've played good defense to this point, but they haven't really played any. They've literally played nobody to this point. And now they lost Chris Ottman-Bell to a passing offense that already was not very good. And so I'm wondering, what I mean?
Huge.
It is huge. Yeah. Your number one receiver goes off that team. Not like they have a bunch of other guys in that receiver. They really don't. So, and Tanner Morgan is already limited. He's a guy who, when he has the really good supporting cast, his game gets dragged up. And when he doesn't, his game gets dragged down. You can just look back in his stats. In 2019, when he had Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson and the whole deal, he was awesome. And then, in the other years when those guys were gone, he was terrible, right? So, it just completely dependent on who his supporting cast is. Now, at least he has Mo Ibrahim healthy, and they're, like I said, they're running the ball well, which takes some pressure off of them. But if in this game they need to pass, you wonder how that's going to manifest. Again, this is one of those where the market is telling me that Minnesota is the correct side, but my numbers disagree with it, and I think that I disagree with it too. I would take 3 points with Sparty here and go against the market on this one. So
Michigan State struggles against the pass. That's been the problem so far this season. They give up. Their back end is not good. They struggle against the pass. But with Ottman-Bell out, that changes everything for Minnesota. They got Spanford at tight end, who's pretty good. Brown Stevens, Geary Wright. These are not guys that are going to hurt you in the passing game. So they can kind of, be a little bit more aggressive in the box to try to stop Ibrahim. And I think it plays into really what Mel Tucker wants to do in this game. But if they had an Ottman-Bell, who's going to keep you honest, who averages 20 yards a catch, who could beat you deep. They have to play a little bit back. And then that's where Mosquito Mo can run. I just think that one loss, which would have really signified an advantage against the weakness of Michigan State, it's a huge deal to me that Autman Bell's out. So that's why I got Michigan State to cover and win this football game.
Love it. Moving to the next one, and this was involved with one of the questions we were asked earlier, and the game that College Game Day is at today. Florida traveling to Tennessee. We got a live line of Tennessee by 10.5 in this game with a total of 62.5. Who do you like in this one, Mike?
Okay, so I like Florida to cover this. I don't think they're going to win. I think you're going to see a crowd at Tennessee unlike you've seen in many, many years because they're excited about their football team now. They've been beaten down by Florida forever, dating back to the Peyton Manning days. So this is a real rivalry game for them. I think they want to run it up on Florida if they can, but the line's too much for me to give in a divisional game. You can't lay, and I'm not sure what it is live. Oh, it's 10.5. You can't give Florida, a team that dominates this series and is a solid football team. They didn't look good against USF, and they look bad against Kentucky, but a solid football team. You can't give them 10.5. So Tennessee wins the game. Florida covers the 10.5. But the over I really like as well. It's 63 live. I think you're going to see, Tennessee is 4-0 in the over in the last 4 conference games, 5-0 in the last 5 home games against the over, 8-1 in their last 9 games overall. Florida puts up points. And if Florida's going to stay in this game, they're going to have to put up points. So mash the over, but I wouldn't lay 11. I want to, because I think honestly Tennessee should blow them out. But I just have to take that 11 and assume Billy Napier is going to figure out a way to get Anthony Richardson to be dangerous.
Yeah, I don't want any part of this side either. And two different reasons. First of all, my numbers say the line is spot on. I got Tennessee minus 10.8. So it's right on the line. But also there's major injury questions on both sides. For Tennessee, their wide receiver 1, Cedric Tillman, I believe he's already been officially ruled out for this game. So they're not going to have him. On the Florida side, they have multiple guys who are questionable. I don't know what their status is yet. They have an offensive lineman who has a thumb injury. They have a cornerback who's questionable with a knee injury. The big one for me is Ventrell Miller, their linebacker. Whenever he has been out of the lineup the past couple of years, the defense plays down. Whenever he's in the lineup the past couple of years, it plays way up. So his status is very important as well. Both these teams, it looks like they're going to be compromised a little bit. We'll see what ends up happening there, but I don't want any part of the side for that reason. I do like the over, though. Florida's defense looks like it's going to be a little compromised. Even though Tillman's going to be out for the Tennessee offense, that does matter for sure. But Tennessee still has the 2 stud receivers. They're also, Jabari Small is going to play, I saw on the Tennessee side. So they still have that deep backfield. And remember, Josh Heupel is one of the best play callers in college football. He schemes receivers open better than just about anybody. I think he's going to be able to find openings against this Florida secondary. So I do like the over, but can't touch the side. Mike, moving to the next game in that time slot.
Got a prop.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
Real quick in that. It's really odd to me, this prop. So Montrell Johnson is not my prop, but I'm going to tell you, Montrell Johnson, the kind of like marquee running back for them. They use a lot of running backs, but he's the guy. 54.5 yards is his over-under for rushing, which to me is low, but I'm not going to touch that. What I find remarkable is Anthony Richardson's over-under is 41.5 rushing yards, okay? Shouldn't be that high. He's going to go over it. And the reason I say that is because we saw against Utah how effective he can be as a guy who runs to set up the pass. We didn't see that against Kentucky. We didn't see that against USF. There's a lot of pressure under Billy Napier from everybody, boosters, fans, even internally, to get Anthony Richardson to run and get him in space. And he could pop off 2 20-yard runs easily and get that over. So the fact that Montrell's number is so low and Richardson's is so high, I think somebody knows the game plan here, and I think Anthony Richardson is going to go over that 41.5.
Interesting angle. Okay. Like that. We'll keep that in mind.
but it's my angle.
Like it. Moving to the last game that we're going to talk about in the 3:30 Eastern window. Indiana, who the luckiest team in the nation so far, but they are 3-0, are traveling to Cincinnati. We have a line on this game of Cincinnati by 16.5 with a total of 57.5. Mike, what are your thoughts on this game?
I won't go too deeply into this one. I think 16.5 is too much. I like Indiana to cover it. Sorry about the autoplay ads that are never ending.
Yeah, you got some link issues over there today.
It just never stops. I mean, every time I refresh ESPN, I get an autoplay video, and I'm sure there's a way I could set it where it doesn't play every time, but I'm not smart enough to figure that out, so I just have to mute it every time. I don't like Indiana. I don't think they're a good football team, and as you said, they're probably the luckiest 3-0 team. Illinois was a nail biter, and Illinois didn't play well, and they beat Idaho, and they weren't impressive, and they just beat Western Kentucky by 3. But 16.5 points, yeah, if Ritter was around, but I don't believe in this Cincinnati team enough to lay 16.5 points against a okay, Power 5 team.
Yeah, I disagree on this one. I really like Cincinnati in this one. I liked them even more when the line opened. That books made a big mistake on this one. Speaking of book mistakes, they opened it at Cincinnati -9. It immediately got hammered on really badly by sharps to get up to Cincinnati -14. By late Sunday night, and then that's where it was. And then it got bet up further to the 16.5. I thought it might even get bet up higher than that to where maybe it'd be 17.5. We'll see if it ends up getting there, but it has held it at 16.5 so far. My line on the game is Cincinnati -22.7. I really do like Cincinnati. Cincinnati's record is not as good as it should be because arguably they could have or should have beaten Arkansas, whereas Indiana, it's the opposite. Mike went into it a little bit. Indiana pulled 2 games totally out of their butts. It's a 1-2 team that's actually 3-0, or however you would say that. But yeah, I mean, the opener, the Illinois game, totally fluky win that they were given by Brett Bielema. And then last week, the Western Kentucky, they were doing whatever they wanted in that game, controlled the entire thing. And then Indiana drove the length of the field at the very end and got a 2-point conversion to even force overtime. And then they ended up pulling it out in overtime. But in terms of second order wins, Indiana has double more than the second highest team already in the nation. They have plus 1.6 second order wins. So, I mean, this isn't just my opinion. Like the objective metrics would tell you the exact same thing. I really like Cincinnati. I think they're going to expose Indiana as a fraud today. So I'm going to lay the points with them. Mike, we're moving now into the evening. These are 7 p.m. East, or this game is a 7 p.m. Eastern kick. One of the biggest games of the day, a neutral site game. Arkansas is playing Texas A&M in Jerry's World. Texas A&M live right now is a 2-point favorite. We have a total on this game of 50.5. What are your thoughts on this one?
Tough one. My thought here is that Arkansas played so poorly last week and almost losing to an FCS team that's going to help them. It's going to help Sam Pittman refocus this football team because, again, this is a team that's not used to the accolades. They're not used to they were in my top 10 when it comes to power rankings in all of college football after beating Cincinnati and South Carolina. And we've learned South Carolina is not good at all. But the clunker they had last week is going to allow them, I think, to rebound. I don't think this A&M team is playing together. They don't impress me in any fashion. Their defense looks okay. I mean, pretty solid, but they had trouble, against the pass earlier in the season. Rocket Sanders is arguably the best back in the SEC. And I think you're going to see a whole lot of him, and you're going to see a whole lot of Arkansas. They're getting 2. I have them winning the game outright in a close battle, but you're going to give me 2. I'll take the 2.
So I don't have a bet on this game, but if I had to, I lean towards A&M because I feel like the perception has gone too far the other way against them, and I get it because I've watched A&M and I've been frustrated with A&M. I have not been impressed with A&M each of the last couple weeks. I mean, both times they played a legitimate opponent because they played FCS team the first time, but of course the effort was not there, and the ingenuity was not there against Appalachian State. They ended up getting upset there. And then last week against Miami, The defense bailed them out, and then also some wonkiness on the Miami side ended up bailing them out of that game. But I don't love them, but they got a nasty defense. They just do. Objectively a top 5 defense in the nation. I think that's going to give Arkansas some issues. And then on the other side, A&M's offense, I do trust it marginally more with Max Johnson than I did with Haynes King. I realize that's sort of damning by faint praise a little bit, but Arkansas also, as you know, has had the injury concerns in the secondary, Catalan being out, et cetera. I think they have one other defensive back who's still out. They also have had tackling issues at Arkansas. For all A&M's faults on their offense, they got a couple guys that are very, very difficult to tackle in space in Achane and Smith. And so those guys are going to present sort of a puzzle to this Arkansas defense. For those reasons, I lean towards A&M. Don't love it because, again, we see in A&M, it's hard to be confident against them, against a good opponent. But that's the way that I lean in that one. Our next game is at 7:30 Eastern kick. Wisconsin has to travel to Columbus today, unfortunately for them, take on Ohio State. Ohio State is an 18.5-point favorite right now with a total of 57. Mike, who do you like in this game?
Yeah, Ohio State obviously owns Wisconsin. They've won 8 straight games in this series. Ohio State is obviously the better football team. Wisconsin's been playing down to their opponents. They haven't been able to get the running game going. Their offensive line has not looked good at all. Everything about this tells me that I want to take Wisconsin because the line is so high. But I really do believe that the Buckeyes are going to rout this game, and the talent gap between them and the speed between them is going to really play out early. And then if you have a Wisconsin team that's down a couple touchdowns and they're forced to throw and get out of character, they're going to be in really bad shape. Wisconsin's 0-5-1 against the spread in their last 6 meetings against Ohio State. 0-5 in their last 5 games from playing on the road against Ohio State. Just they don't play well against Ohio State, especially in Columbus. I want a good game. I do. I want to think that Wisconsin is like a real contender in the West, and they could give Ohio State a game down the line in the Big Ten championship game. But this is going to be just a beating. That's what I see. I think they're going to lose by 25 points.
Yeah, that's the way that I would lean as well. I'm not going to bet on this game, in part because there's a lot of injuries on both sides. I had heard earlier this week that Wisconsin could be without both their tackles. I have not heard an update on that, but Wisconsin, like, their best thing is it's like the run blocking. And so if they're compromised in the front, especially in this game, they're kind of up Craps Creek. And then on the Ohio State side, I had heard a rumor in the past couple of days that Jackson Smith and Jigba, his status maybe wasn't as solidified as some had hoped coming, since he had returned for the Toledo game. You wouldn't figure you play him at Toledo if he was still compromised a little bit, but it looks like we'll see, if he ends up playing today or if he's 100% or whatever. But before I was leaning towards the over, but if Wisconsin, their offensive line is compromised, and then Ohio State's receiving core if it's without Jackson Smith and Jigba, I'm not sure then if I could bet the over. If those were the case, well, we have to wait for news on that. So I got to stay away from that. I probably would bet on Ohio. Like, Ohio State would be my lean on the side. But again, I would want to know about Jackson Smith and Jigba's status before I did that. Wisconsin, their defense, they have shown that they can cover people this season. I will give that to them. Ohio State, they're going to rip up any secondary as long as they're at full strength. So we got to check on that one and see. Mike, our next one, this is an 8:00 Eastern kick tonight. Kansas State travels to Oklahoma. We have a line on this game of Oklahoma by 13.5 with a total of 53. Who do you like in this game?
I don't like either team. I like the under. I think this is one of those games where, people are going to mash the over simply because it's Oklahoma and they're putting up so many points and they're coming off a game against, Nebraska where they just absolutely lit them up. Kansas State coming off a really bad loss, but I don't think I think this matchup plays to a low scoring game, and low scoring is relative. Under 53 or whatever the live line is a low scoring game to me. I don't like Oklahoma to cover, but I'm not touching that. I take the under, and I think Oklahoma wins this game, maybe 7, maybe 10 points, but Kansas State stays in it.
Yeah, I think that was all well said. I'm not betting on the side either. If I had to, I would have a slight lean to Kansas State, but that's mostly because of the way the game script, the way that I see it playing out. And I like the under. I legitimately like the under. I bet the under. So I'm with you on that, Mike. I like the under even more earlier in the week when forecasts were calling for high winds today. I did check the forecast today. The weather people apparently have come off that a bit, but so now it's like 6 miles per hour. Earlier in the week, they were calling for it to be in the teens. But even irregardless of that, I still like the matchup in terms of it going under. That's the way that Kansas State wants to play. On offense, they play super duper slow, and they have a one-dimensional offense, which is basically just force the ball to Deuce Vaughn over and over again as a runner, as a receiver, however you can get Deuce Vaughn the ball. Adrian Martinez is their quarterback, and he can scramble around a little bit, and he can shuttle the ball off to Deuce Vaughn. But we know who Adrian Martinez is at this point. We have watched way too much Adrian Martinez in our lives. He can't complete balls down the field. It just is what it is. So you take that away. Brent Venables, when you can only do one thing, he typically is able to come up with the scheme to be able to slow down the thing that you want to do and try to make you play left-handed. And then on the other side, Oklahoma, their offense, it looked way better than it actually is last week because they were playing a Nebraska team that had just fired Scott Frost that isn't particularly talented on defense in the first place. But, I mean, that offense is not going to be that playing against what is a really solid Kansas State defense. Kansas State's defense is efficient against both the run and the pass. So I think they'll be able to do stuff with that. I also think they'll be able to take away some of those explosive passes that we saw. So I do like the game going under. We're going to do one more game, and then we're going to go to audience questions. So if anybody has any other questions to get in, do them in the next couple minutes here, and we'll hit what you guys got. We're going to be going for another about 10 to 15 minutes live leading up to kickoff. Mike, our next game, it's another 8 o'clock Eastern kick. Boston College at Florida State. We got a live line on this one of Florida State by 17.5 with a total of 48.5. What do you like in this one?
I like BC because it's such a big number. I don't think BC wins this football game, but this is my theory on this one too. I've heard they're going to have their black uniforms on. This is the first sellout for Florida State in 5, 6, 7 years. Really? It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, they expanded the stadium. So since the stadium expansion, this is the first time they're going to have, I think, a full 79,000. It's going to be a crazy, crazy crowd. And this line is now plus 18.5, by the way. Crazy crowd, a lot of expectation. 3-0 Florida State team that's back. Special uniforms and a struggle. BC is not good. Their offensive line is a mess. They're not running the ball effectively. Dracovic hasn't been very good, but they're also a physical team that's going to sort of try to play smash mouth football with Florida State, try to control the clock, try to keep this as a low scoring game. That's why the over under is 49, which is low. And I think they're going to stay within 3 touchdowns. I think they lose, by 14, maybe 10, but I'm going to take that 18.5.
Yeah, so it looks like it was 17.5 this morning, and then I think right before we started recording, the news came out that Jordan Travis was going to play. Travis had suffered an ankle injury last week against Louisville, and he had missed the practices early in the week through Tuesday, I believe, if I'm remembering right. And I think he had returned in a limited capacity on Wednesday. That's when his status was way up in the air, but looks like he's going to end up giving it a go. I do like Boston, regardless of what the line is. I'll certainly take the 18.5. I do like Boston College in this game. I don't think that they're going to win. So my handicap is basically the same as yours, Mike, just keeping it close. Boston College, the thing that they do best on defense, it's stopping the run. Well, that's what you got to do to hold down the Florida State offense. And in this game, even though Travis is playing, he's going to be compromised running because of the ankle injury. So, you'd think that maybe they're going to try to have him pass the ball more to Johnny Wilson, which that looked really good last Friday. And Travis has certainly made steps as a passer. Credit to him. But when their running game isn't humming, the passing game plays down. Their passing game needs the enormous threat of the run to play up in the way that it does, and then they get the advantage on the outside, the one-on-one with no deep safety, etc. So Travis being compromised, his mobility being compromised, I think aids them. And I think Jurkovec and Zay Flowers are going to be able to do enough on offense. You mentioned how bad Boston College's offensive line is. It certainly is. Against a full strength Florida State defensive front, I wouldn't be betting on Boston College, but they have all sorts of injuries up front. They have a whole bunch of guys that are questionable. Jared Verse, their best defensive player, being one of them. Multiple defensive tackles. I've not seen an update yet on them this morning, but they're all questionable to play. So Florida State's not as strong up front as they would typically be because of that. So I'm going to take the Boston College plus 18.5. So is Mike. Let's go to our last segment of audience questions for today. Our first one, Mike, is from Andrew, who wants to know if we have any thoughts on Wazoo and Oregon. Mike, the line on that one is, I think it was 7 before. Let's see if it's we got 6.5. So Oregon minus 6.5 at Wazoo. The total on that one is 54.5. Do you have any thoughts on that game for Andrew?
Yeah, I got Wazoo covering. I don't know if they're going to win, but home dog, a good football team. I mean, a lot of people don't really pay attention to Washington State football and what Cam Moore does and how well they play. I mean, they beat a Wisconsin team and surprised everybody, and their defense is better than most people think. They struggle with Idaho out the gate, so everybody's like, but Cam Ward, the passing game. Oregon's coming off a big win over BYU. I think they win this football game, but they're gonna come into it with a little bit of a letdown. And I just, Bo Nix hasn't turned a corner to me. He's gonna make a couple mistakes in this game to keep it close. So I got Oregon winning, but Washington State covering.
I guess I don't have a bet on it, but my lean would be, if I had to, would be on Oregon. My line on it is Oregon minus 7.8. But my concern with it, it's exactly what Mike is alluding to, of Oregon coming off this triumphant win. And then you turn around the next weekend, you have to travel to the Palouse. And now you're facing sort of this reconstituted Wazoo team that plays tougher defense than we expected. And they have this new quarterback. The offense maybe isn't as explosive as we thought, at least yet. We'll see about it going forward. But Oregon is facing them for the first time, and obviously Dan Lanning's getting a first look at him as well. But qualitatively, I think I would take Oregon on this spread. But like I said, it would just be a lean for me. Thanks for the question. Steve Jackson, my buddy Steve. Hey, Steve. He asks about this is fun, classic Steve. He wants to know about our thoughts on Hawaii and New Mexico State. Mike, can you fathom? Can you stand giving him an opinion on Hawaii and New Mexico State?
Steve.
I do know Steve. Yes.
He's a complete degenerate gambler, right?
He is a complete degenerate gambler. Yes.
He's the only person on earth that would ask this question is a complete degenerate gambler. It's a horrible football game.
I'll get Steve help after the show. Don't worry.
Because this is a game no one should touch. New Mexico State is covered. They're favored by 5 points at home against Hawaii. Both of these teams could lose this game. Like, they both suck so bad that they could lose this game. I don't know what to do, except I do know that anytime New Mexico State is laying points, I have to take the other team. So I'm going to take Hawaii to cover the 5, just because New Mexico State's awful.
Yeah, I'm going Hawaii too. My number on this game, it's sort of the other way. I got Hawaii minus 2.7. I don't really understand how you're going to favor. I realize it's the toilet bowl game, but how are you going to favor New Mexico State by 5 over any FBS team? I've actually watched a way too much New Mexico State football already this year, because they had the game against Nevada, and then they also had the opener against Minnesota. So all my buddies came over again, because I'm coming to you guys from Minneapolis. So we watched that one too. New Mexico they make your eyes bleed. That offense in particular, the offensive line is an abomination. It's one of the worst FBS offensive lines you'll ever see. I would imagine that they're going to start the Frakes kid because Pavia is a sub FCS quarterback. He's really, really bad. Jerry Kill seems to like him for some reason. Hawaii has more talent than New Mexico State does. New Mexico State definitely, they have home field advantage. You give them the coaching edge too with Jerry Kill over Timmy Chang, and Timmy Chang's like fourth game. But I'm going to go with the talent advantage when I'm getting 5 points in the toilet bowl. And Steve, believe in your dreams. You're not a degenerate. You don't need help. Bet that game. Bet on Hawaii. We both like Hawaii. Thanks for the question. Queen Mike thinks you need help. Queen T asks for our thoughts on Marshall and Troy. Queen T, we did go over that earlier. I'll just tell you really quick. Mike liked Marshall and I liked Troy. So but I think it was just a lean for you, Mike. It was certainly a lean for me on Troy.
Yeah, it was nothing like bet your house or anything.
Yeah.
I liked Marshall. I think they're playing well. I like the way their offensive balance is, and their cockiness after that Notre Dame one.
So we're on just slightly different sides of the teeter-totter on that one. And then Mike Huseman, wants to know about Arizona State and Utah. And we actually actually let's jump into that one right now, because that was one of the last two games that we were going to talk about. Mike, thank you for the question. The spread on that game is Utah minus 15.5 right now with a total of 54. Mike, Farrell, who do you like in that one?
Yeah, this is another one where it's an interim coach. The team should be excited that Herm's gone, but this is just not a good football team. I mean, Valladay is a good running back. They can run the football. Utah may be a little bit overrated since now we're seeing Florida's not a very good football team, but I still like Utah to cover this. Arizona State is in complete disarray. They don't know who their next coach is going to be. They lost so much talent to the portal. They're watching their teammates succeed, the Johnny Wilsons of the world succeed elsewhere. And I just think this is a team that is going to come out early like Nebraska did with a little bit of fire and then just fall flat on their face, and Utah's going to win this game in a rout.
Even Jaden Daniels quietly playing well. Right?
Daniels, the old kid up at Louisville's playing well, even though Louisville sucks. Pearsall at Florida. They're just on and on. There's guys from Arizona State making impacts elsewhere. And then, their best players are transfer and Valladay, but they're just not a very dangerous football team to me.
Yeah, well, yeah. Certainly not, and we've had a lot of funny stories coming out of Arizona State, not just this past week, but going back to over the summer, over the off season. I want a 30 for 30 on this, on like what's happened over the past year. Well, let's go back to COVID. I want a 30 for 30 on what happened to the Arizona State football program ever since then. But I digress. On this game, I would lean the other way. I would take the points with Arizona State. I actually considered putting them into my best bets column this week. I couldn't quite get there because I had to hold my nose the whole time, and I couldn't quite get there on putting them in. But I just think it's too many points. My line in this game, it's like Utah -9, and the market obviously reacted in such a way when Herm got fired. But the line had opened up; it was around Utah -7. Then Herm gets fired, and they take it off the board. When they put it back out, it was over 2 touchdowns. And then it got up to Utah -16 for a little bit. Now it's to 15, but I just think it's too many points, being over 2 touchdowns, especially the way that Utah plays. It's not like it's a wide open offense where they're trying to run up the score. The other thing is Arizona State, despite, the issues that they've had, yada, yada, their offense still has been able to generate explosive plays. They're struggling with the efficiency, of course. But one thing I was happy to see was the interim coach. I don't even remember what his name is. I know he coached at Chandler High School. He coached Nikhil Harry in high school. I know that. But anyhow, he was talking to the media and this week and talking about different things that he was going to change immediately. It's sort of like when the president takes over and he's like, on the first day, I'm going to do this, yada, yada. That was what this, he was like, this is what I'm changing this right now. And the whole list made sense. It was like intuitive things. It's like number one, I'm going to get Emory Jones on the run more when he's throwing, more concepts using his legs for throws. Number two, you're going to see more RPO stuff from us. Number three, like it was like 3 or 4 different things like that. All of them to me nodded at improving the efficiency of that offense. They can already do the explosion thing. Like I said, you're never going to improve Emory Jones's accuracy. That is not going to happen. But you can use his legs more. You can put him into more advantageous situations where the completions are much easier. And in that way, you can artificially tick up his completion percentage and make your offense more efficient by doing smarter things. Herm Edwards had, whether he had checked out, whether the game had passed him by, whatever, even outside of the sanction stuff, offensively, he was no longer doing that team any service, which is why I found the story about his assistant coaches were giving away the playbook funny. I could have written the playbook for them, like a kindergartner could have written it with crayons on like, 3 different napkins at McDonald's. Kind of a ridiculous story. Mike, our last game, unless you had any other thoughts on that one, our last game of the day.
Just run. And Sean Aguano is going to throw more. But with that, comes mistakes. I think he's going to be more aggressive, and I think Emory Jones is going to turn the ball over a few times. And that's why I have Utah. I don't think Utah is an explosive offense. I just think they're a more solid football team on both sides of the ball, and they should be able to route this one. We'll see. But yeah, we could talk about USC Oregon State because this is an intriguing money line one for me.
Yeah, our last game of the day for today. Thank you for everybody for tuning in and for all the questions were awesome today. So thank you for everybody for that. But our last one of the day, this kickoff, we jumped ahead chronologically. The Arizona State Utah game kicks off at 10:30 Eastern. This one kicks off at 9:30 Eastern tonight. USC at Oregon State. Another game where the line has done all sorts of interesting things this week. When it opened, it was USC -7 at some books and -6.5 at some books. And then the money has come in on on Oregon State for a lot of the week, especially from sharp bettors. It had gotten all the way down to Oregon State +5. And now it looks like today it's toggled back up to now where it's USC -6. But the market is doing lots of interesting things with this game. Mike, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think this is a well-coached Oregon State team. I think if you asked anybody on the planet who's not an Oregon State fan to name one player, they couldn't do it. But that doesn't matter. It's a quarterback who doesn't make mistakes in Chance Nolan. It's a running back in Deshaun Fenwick that nobody knows about, who's averaging 5.5 carry and is very, very efficient. They've got some speed guys in Tyjon Lindsey who can stretch the field and Anthony Gould who can stretch the field. And then their possession guys. They're missing Musgrave from what I hear, and that hurts because he's like –
and Trey Lowe for this game. A rotational back, but it deserves mention.
Musgrave's bigger part of their passing game because he's their safety valve and someone that, Nolan really likes to target, especially in the red zone. So that's going to hurt them. But the home field advantage, Oregon State has been undefeated at home. I think they were undefeated all last season at home. The crowd there is into this, for the first time in a very long time. USC's coming in, they're hot off these wins. They haven't been tested. They might come in a little bit overconfident, and I think Oregon State stays in this game. Now 6, I'd rather have it 7. It's 6. But I would take, Oregon State to cover the 6. And really, if you're tempted, it's only 195. I was hoping it'd be more like 250. You could take the money line on here because this could be one of the upsets of the weekend for sure.
And certainly that's where the market is leaning on this. And the sharp bettors in the market. It seems like Oregon State is that side, based on my read of it and where we've seen the discrepancy of the money coming in against the ticket spot for sure. I like the points you were making about the Oregon State skill guys. Oregon State is more talented, I think, than folks think. Trayshawn Harrison is a really talented receiver that they got. You were mentioning the Musgrave injury. The unfortunate thing about that is now there's going to be even more attention that the USC secondary can place on trying to take Harrison away. And Harrison's the one thing that Oregon State uses to try to disincentivize defenses from stacking the box, right? Because you have to keep the deep safety to try to help take away the deep stuff, whatever. So we'll see how. And Musgrave's been out. I think he was out the last game as well. But those are the guys that get all of the targets for that offense. With Gold being third, I do lean USC, but it's definitely not as it's. I'm not super duper confident about it. I'll say that, mostly because, like you mentioned, this game being in Corvallis, and I do think that Oregon State can do some things to discombobulate USC or to give them some problems. But the Oregon State offense, you only have those couple guys that the USC defense needs to be concerned about, in part because of that Musgrave injury. So I think they can. It's a smart coaching staff, right? Like Alex Grinch is a great defensive coordinator. I think that you can create a defensive game plan to combat that, essentially. Again, trying to take away the one thing, the deep plays by Harrison, and then also addressing the run game of Oregon State. I'm definitely concerned enough that I'm not going to be laying any wood with USC, but USC has this deserves to be mentioned. The market has, ever since the second game, not the first game, but ever since the second game, the market and the sharp bettors have been going against USC. You remember they did it in the Stanford game, and then last week was against I'm blanking, but the last two games, the market, the sharp bettors were going against USC, and it has not worked out for them. And this time it's happening again. So we'll see if they can finally get it, but maybe that's not. It was
Fresno.
Fresno, that's right. Yeah, and the injury and stuff like that. But anyhow, I definitely lean towards USC, but again, not super duper confident in that one. Guys, that is going to do it for today's episode. Thank you for joining us for another episode of College Football Game Day Live. For my co-host Mike Farrell, I'm Thor Nystrom. Enjoy your college football Saturday, and good luck with your bets today.